Hello again, this is Dr. Franz. Last week we considered some Old Testament verses against idolatry, and we saw a lot of idolatry in our case studies of Israel and Judah after Solomon. But then what about the New Testament? Jesus' ministry was to Israel, but he did not run into physical idols among the Jews. The Jews actually learned from their captivities to put away physical idols. What idols we run into were owned by unbelieving Gentiles, like in the book of Acts. For example, Paul was so grieved about all the idols around Mars Hill in Athens, and he ran into Demetrius, an idol maker in Ephesus, where a great riot broke out. And Paul provides teaching in 1 Corinthians 8 through 10 concerning idols and food used in idol worship. One could guess that idolatry had significantly waned, at least among God's people. It seemed outside the church in the book of Acts. But then we run into some verses in the epistles, and we learn where idolatry was hiding, in a very sneaky place. Colossians 3:5, "Put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature, sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is idolatry." And again, Paul wrote in Ephesians 5, verse 5, where he talks about one who is covetous, that is, an idolater. Now, I've gone more into depth into this teaching in our other lecture this week, but let me just say that when Paul connected covetousness and idolatry, we suddenly realized that the United States, a first world superpower and advanced civilization that prides itself on rational thinking and being a champion over superstition, suddenly we are shoulder to shoulder with the pagan idol worshippers of the ancient world. And as God's people, but yet also of our American culture, we may well be in the same boat with Israel and Judah in their long struggle against idols. We can get a sense of the Old Testament world's magnetism toward idols when we remember the Hebrews brought out of Egypt by the mighty hand of God, but as soon as Moses took some days on a trip up to Mount Sinai, they soon made a golden calf and began worshiping it. Amazing. A testimony of how idolatry permeated the ancient cultures. But then, how fast do Americans race to embrace the latest new idols? God knows, but it seems pretty quickly. Of course, modern idolatry is not just found in America, but worldwide. For instance, in the book of Revelation, after God opened the great seal judgments, the Lord through the Apostle John says in Revelation 9:20 and 21, "The rest of humankind who were not killed by these plagues did not repent of the works of their hands or give up worshiping demons and idols." So at some time in the future, God will look at the whole world scene and see, among other things, their tenacious devotion to idols. So here we are in the New Testament era, sandwiched between Old Testament idolatry and the future world idolatry Revelation 9 mentions. Yes, we live in an idolatrous world and in an idolatrous nation. So idolatry just isn't out there among unbelievers. We have the ability to descend into idolatry, which is why the Apostle John wrote in 1 John 5:21, "Little children, keep yourselves from idols." And idols have a lot to do with desires. Of course, desire is a good thing. God gave us the ability to desire and to even have strong ambitions. We learn to desire God and the things of God, to desire His Word, fellowship, and so on. However, when our desires are under control of our sinful nature, we can find ourselves entering the realm of idolatry. Think of this word illicit. The root L-I-C from illicit gives us words like license. That is, when something is permitted, allowable. But the ill or the IL in front of illicit negates that, like logical and illogical. So an illicit desire is a desire that should not be permitted. It goes beyond appropriate borders. It's not right. At this point, let me introduce John Piper's definition of an idol. Anything that we come to rely on for some blessing or help or guidance in the place of a wholehearted reliance upon the true and living God. Notice that phrase, in the place of, in this definition. It's bearing a lot of weight here. Idolatry goes in the opposite direction of God. It is something instead of God. Can we see why God rightly calls the things we choose in place of Him as gods or idols? They take the place of the true and living God, not Him, but this. We've elevated those things to a godhood status, whether we consciously recognize this or not. The Bible gives some teaching about how not to have idols, like in Luke chapter 12, 13 to 21, where Jesus warns against all kinds of greed. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Then he said to them, "Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself?" This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. Notice how Jesus sums up the two responses we can make in life. First, storing up for ourselves, and second, being rich toward God. I like the Message translation here. Just then God showed up and said, "Fool, tonight you die, and your barn full of goods, who gets it?" That's what happens when you fill your barn with self and not with God. The foolish farmer was covetous. That barn was like a pagan temple, an idol. Instead, Jesus said, "Be rich, not for yourself, but concerning God." And this Greek word toward, as in being rich toward God, has that sense of being rich with reference to God. Be rich in the things of God, in your knowledge of God, etc. That is, have a spiritual mindset that drives your life. Don't be driven by illicit desires for wealth and security, like with your big barn, whatever it may look like. But I want to look at one other New Testament passage very quickly as we head toward home. Hebrews 13:5. "Keep your lives free from the love of money, and be content with what you have, because God has said, 'Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you.'" There the phrase love of money comes from the words love of silver, another way of expressing greed. The Lord, through the writer of Hebrews, gives two main antidotes. First, the author said, "Be content with what you have." Second, remember that "never will I leave you, never will I forsake you." That is, trust God to be with us and to take care of us. Well, it's a whole lot easier to be content with what you have when we understand that. Many times God has communicated this, including in the Great Commission, "For lo, I am with you always." He is with us, to use us, to take care of us, to protect us, to meet our needs, to fellowship with us. What a great antidote for idolatry, enjoying God's presence instead, and trusting Him that He has given us all we need. Well, some simple thoughts here. Thanks very much.